Good morning, everyone. My name is Kimberly and I'm one of the reporters for today's topic. Topic 2: the characteristic of good governance. But before that, I've prepared a short video clip for us to remember and understand what is good governance. So, here's the presentation.
When a group is too large for everyone to be involved in decision-making, it creates an entity to facilitate the process. In an association, that entity is the board of directors. Members delegate the bulk of decision-making to the board, who then delegate the implementation of those decisions to staff. Governance is the rules and practices by which the board of directors ensures accountability, fairness, and transparency in its decision-making. Good governance is a robust and reliable system for making confident and timely decisions. Good governance gives members confidence in the decision-making process and leads to better decisions. It builds trust and respect between members and elected leaders, and it ensures ethical decision-making. Governance determines who has a voice in making decisions, how those decisions are made, and who is accountable. The rules for governing are defined in the association's bylaws and other governance documents. Ultimately, however, it's the norms and actions of the association's leaders that determine the effectiveness of governance. Here are some of the most important characteristics of good governance. Associations have an obligation to communicate, explain, and answer to members for the consequences of the decisions they made. Members should be able to follow and understand the decision-making process, including how and why a decision was made. Board decisions should be consistent with relevant legislation, common law, and the association's letters patent. Boards make decisions based on what is best for the membership, which requires that they solicit and listen to their needs. Associations should implement decisions and follow processes that make the best use of available resources while mitigating risk. The rules and practices by which the board of directors operates determines its governance. Good governance ensures accountability, fairness, and transparency as the association works to fulfill its mandate.
So, I believe that you guys understand what the video presentation is all about. So, for today's topic, it is all about the characteristic of good governance. But before that, let's define what is good governance. So, what is good governance? According to the module, good governance is like government. Governance can be good or bad. Bad government and bad governance have similar characteristics: corruption, whimsical and expedient decision making, short-sightedness, disregard for the concern of the many, and decisions. So it means that governance, like government, it can be either good or bad. If we recognize that a country's governance is good, we can expect a better management system and a better society as a result. On the other hand, if the government is not well governed, we can observe the consequences of poor governance or the drawbacks of bad governance, such as corruption, poverty, and violence, as well as the fact that people are not taken into account in decision making and that truth is not respected in the society. In the same vein, the criteria for good governance and would be the same as good governance. They include accountability and ethics in decision making and implementation, transparency and predictability, rule bound decision making and action, responsiveness, a long term view of the public interest. So, as we notice, um, this is the characteristics of the good governance should have to provide an effective way or traits that is needed in governing a society or a country. So, One goal of good governance is to enable an organization to do its work and fulfill its mission. Good governance results in organizational effectiveness. So, good governance can be also adopted in organizations, corporates, or managements. Because if there is a good governance, it can fulfill the goals and missions of an organization that wants to pursue. So there's a quotation. Good governance is about achieving desired results and achieving them in the right way. What do you think the meaning of the quotation? Do you have any idea? So, the quotation means that good governance is about achieving your goals using the right way. For example, you are assigned to create a marketing plan for the business of the company you are working. Um, you copied your coworker's plan and passed it to your boss. Since your goal is to pass it to your boss and your boss likes it, but in the way how you done your ask or how you did your task is in a wrong way, that is not good governance. Though you have a good intention, but the way how you did your actions is morally bad. If we want to achieve our desired goals, it should be done in a right way and it should be socially acceptable. So, since the right way is largely shaped by the cultural norms and values of the organization, there can be no universal template for good governance. Each organization must tailor its own definition of good governance to suit its needs and values. Each organization's notion of good governance differs. It is up to the company or the organization to decide how will they implement or define what is good governance in accordance with its needs and principles. So, good governance is, among other things, participatory, transparent, and accountable. It is also effective and equitable. It promotes the rule of law. Good governance ensures that political, social, and economic priorities are based on broad consensus in society and that the voices of the poorest and the most vulnerable are heard in decision making over all the allocation of development resources. So as we can see, these are the traits that the company should have or an organization that must have in order to achieve its objective or aim more effectively. In government, good governance is important since it determines a country's or society's efficacy.
Good day everyone, my name is JOANAH DIONZON, the reporter of 8 Characteristics of Good Governance by United Nations Development Program or UNDP. Good governance is participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, transparent, responsive, effective and efficient, equitable and inclusive, and follow the rules of law. It is also responsive to the present and future needs of the society. I've read that it assures that corruption is minimized, the views of minorities are taken into account, and that the voices of most vulnerable in the society are heard in decision making. Interrelated, these core characteristics are mutually reinforcing and cannot stand alone. Why do you think that this characteristic cannot stand alone? Because in governing an organization or a country is a big responsibility, and decision making will have a big effects in the present and future generation. In decision making, there's a different steps that may have different characteristics possess. You cannot achieve your goal in just one characteristic because after your decision, accountability is waiting even in good or bad result. According to the book I've read, an example of this characteristic cannot stand alone is accessible information means more transparency, broader participation, and more effective decision making. Broad participation contributes both to the exchange of information needed for effective decision making and for the legitimacy of those decisions. Legitimacy in turn means effective implementation and encourages further participation. And responsive institution must be transparent and function according to the rule of law if they are to be equitable. The first characteristic is participation. It refers to the opportunity of active involvement by all sector of society in decision-making process regarding all issues of interest. It is represented in system that enable citizens to participate in public decision-making. It is emerging as realistic option of addressing deficiency and improving public accountability. The purpose of participatory governance is to guarantee that different interests and social groups, particularly to those unprivileged or excluded groups, are represented equally in those decisions and activities that have greatest immediate impact on those lives or people's lives. Because in decision making of government or an organization affect all people in that particular organization or country, we should all have a voice in public. Next is rule of law. Legal framework should be fair and enforced impartially, particularly the laws on human rights. According to JOANAH 2002, it is the exercise of state power using and guided by published standards that embody widely supported social values, avoid particularism, and enjoy broad-based public support. It means that legal frameworks, law, and order exist, that the justice system is independent and effective, property rights and contract are enforced, human rights norms are applied, and the executive power is regulated by constitutional limits. Furthermore, laws must be responsive to the demands of society as well as fair and impartially enforced. It should be highlighted that nearly any state, including corrupt and repressive ones, has the power to adopt and enforce law that do not guarantee the aforementioned standard. A true rule of law, on the other hand, involves the participation of both state and society, and it is the result of complex and deeply embedded social processes. Next is transparency. Transparency is built on the free flow of information. Processes, institutions, and information are directly accessible to those concerned with them, and enough information is provided to understand and monitor them. Rules and procedures must be open to scrutiny and easy to understand, implying that the transparent government clearly indicates what is being done, how and why activities take place, who is involved, and how decisions are reached. Transparency is also one of the most essential basic concepts of the battle against corruption. It requires significant resources as well as a system that enables the free flow of relevant and freely accessible information to those or to the public in accurate format, allowing decision and their performance to be easily monitored. In a company, there must have transparent information to anyone, and that could be update on what is happening in the organization. Example is the sale of the company and the progress of the organization. In Philippines, according to www.pna.gov.ph, the country received an Open Budget Index or OBI score of 76, maintaining its position as the most fiscally transparent country in the region while ranking 10th place worldwide. transparency score of 61, and above implies comprehensive, timely, and online publication of all 8 key budget documents, including the mid-year review, a feat achieved twice by the country since the onset of the OBS. The fourth one is responsiveness. Institution and processes try to serve all stakeholders. Good governance requires that institution and processes try to serve all stakeholders within a reasonable time frame. Mechanism to promote responsiveness may include selective decentralization, such that local governments are said to be more in tune with the demands of their residents and can service them more quickly, with the people becoming more involved in decision making as a result. Citizens' charters and facilitation laws can further improve responsiveness by establishing timeframes for each stage in obtaining frontline services, as well as hotlines and people committed to hearing and immediate responding to complaints and grievances. Responsiveness is difficult to quantify for comparative purposes, particularly at the worldwide level. Here in Rodriguez Rizal, when Bagyong Yolanda and Ulysses happened, we may say that they are not responsive enough because it took 8 to 10 hours to rescue individuals trapped over the roof. They don't have enough resources to rescue them, and their hotline keeps stating unreachable and something like that. And some of them drown and die because they are not rescued immediately. When COVID begins, assistance from government took several months before it received by people who lost their job or in need because of pandemic. It also affected that those workers in organization because of the rules implemented when COVID-19 happened. I'm not against with our government, but for me, it is not that responsive enough when calamity or pandemic happen. Next is fifth, consensus-oriented. Good governance mediates differing interests to reach a broad consensus on what is in the best interest of the group and, where possible, on policies and procedures. It ensures that existing systems serve the best interests of society. This may be one of the most difficult principles, as any action or policy is likely to affect different groups to society in different and often opposing ways. To reach compromise, strong, impartial, and flexible mediation structure is required so that the best interest of the entire community can be served. Public hearings, referendums, debate forums, citizen legal right to petition, policymakers, and consultation mechanism are all examples of way towards consensus or at the very least compromise. Public officials or leaders must prioritize our interests over their own, and we need to trust them. Next is equity and inclusiveness. One of the most common characteristic that organizations have. All men and women have opportunities to improve or maintain their well-being. All members of society, especially the most vulnerable, are taken into consideration in policymaking, and no one feels left behind. For excellent governance, an equitable and just society must be formed. The well-being of the society is determined by how its members feel about it. It requires that all of its members believe that they are stake in it and they are not left out of the governance process. And promote equity and inclusiveness, government or leader can make a program that support and consider all gender, racial, and even the poorest people. It includes embracing everyone and treating them equally. Everyone should be able to take advantage and enjoy government or organization benefits. The practice of ensuring that people in the workplace will feel like they belong is known as inclusion. 7 is effectiveness and efficiency. Processes and institutions produce results that meet needs while making the best use of resources. It required the enhancement of quality and standardization of public service delivery, the professionalization of the bureaucracy, focusing government's effort on vital function, and the elimination of redundancy or overlap in function and operation. Effectiveness is the process of producing a desired intent or result, and it requires doing the right thing to make it happen. Efficiency, on the other hand, refers to the prevention or reduction of waste materials, effort, money, time, or energy. Making decision that is for long-term cost effective is like road rehabilitation but will last over 10 years like in Japan. But it will provide safety and reduce traffic. Maybe it costs 5 times expensive than the usual cost of road construction, but it is better than the cheaper roads construction because as we can see, cheaper road construction doing it like yearly. It is too nuisance and time consuming for every citizen or riders passing there because of the traffic they make or they made. Yes, transparency is there like the tarpaulin they show in every construction. You will see there that it show how much or what is the budget in that road construction. Next is accountability. Decision makers in government, the private sector or civil society organization are accountable to the public as well as institutional stakeholders. It is responsibility for one's action so that system exists for decision makers in government or organization. Accountable leaders communicate their team's goals and objectives as well as key results in order to foster alignment or and team focus. They accept responsibility when things go wrong and give credit where credit is due when things go well. Accountability plays an important part in fostering effective governance in increasing public trust in government performance. Decision makers will be held responsible for consequences. Whether decision or action are internal or external to an organization or institution, who is accountable to whom varies. In general, to those who will be affected by an organization or institution decision or action are be held accountable. Without transparency and the rule of law, accountability cannot be enforced. In conclusion, good governance is the responsible management of the state, society, and resources. It helps in protecting the interests of people of all socioeconomic background, gender, and racial. It focuses on public sector management, the legal framework for development, accountability, transparency, and the free flow of information. It is a long-term objective that it is difficult to realize in its best. Few countries and society have come close to achieving total good governance. However, in order to build sustainable human development, steps must be taken to work toward this ideal with the goal of making it reality. People may easily identify strong governance in a state based on its quality or qualities: participation, rule of law, transparency, responsiveness, consensus oriented, equity and inclusiveness, effectiveness and efficiency, and accountability are all aspects of good governance. That's all, and the next topic will be reported by Hannah Aquino. Thank you.
Four basic elements of good governance according to ADB. It relates to the governance to the effectiveness with which development assistance is used, the impact of development programs and projects, and the absorptive capacity of borrowing countries. To address governance issues, the Asian Development Bank has built upon the approach of the World Bank and has identified four basic elements of good governance, such as accountability, participation, predictability, and transparency. First one is accountability. Accountability imperative to make public officials answerable for government behavior and responsiveness to the entity from which they derive their authority. This may be achieved differently in different countries or political structures depending on the history, the cultural mass, and the value system involved. Lack of accountability tends in time to reduce the state's credibility as an economic partner. It undermines the capacity of governments to sustain the long-term business confidence essential for growth-enhancing private sector investment. Also, accountability can help reduce sovereign risk. Accountability also means establishing criteria to measure the performance of public officials as well as oversight mechanism to ensure that standards are met. Accountability of public sector institutions is facilitated by evaluation of their economic and financial performance. Economic accountability relates to the effectiveness of policy formulation and implementation, and efficiency in resource use. Financial accountability covers accounting system for expenditure control and internal and external audits. In accountability, the specific areas of action are the public sector management, the public enterprise management, public financial management, and civil service reform. The second one is participation. The principle of participation derives from an acceptance that people at the heart of development. They are not only the ultimate beneficiaries of development but are also the agents of development. They act through groups or associations such as trade unions, chamber of commerce, NGOs, political parties, and as individuals. Through letters to newspaper editors, participating in radio and television talk show or voting. Since development is both for and by the people, they need to have access to the institutions that promote it. At the grassroots level, participation implies that government structures are flexible enough to offer beneficiaries and others affected the opportunity to improve the design and implementation of public programs and projects. This increased ownership and massive support. At the different levels, the effectiveness of policies and institutions inclining on the economy as a whole may require the broad support and cooperation of major economic actors concerned, to the extent that the interface between the public agencies and the private sector is conducive to the rapid participation in the economy. National economic performance will be enhanced. In participation, the specific areas of action are participation of beneficiaries and effective interface between the government and the private sector. The centralization of public and service delivery platforms, the empowerment of the local government, and cooperation with non-government organizations. Third element is the predictability. Predictability refers to the existence of laws, regulation, and policies to regulate society and their fair and consistent application. And this, the importance of predictability cannot be overstated, since without it, the orderly existence of citizens and institutions would be impossible. The, the rule of law encompasses both well-defined rights and duties, as well as mechanisms for enforcing them and settling disputes in impartial manner. It requires the state and its subsidiary agencies to be as much bound by and answerable to the legal system or private individuals and enterprises. The importance of rule-based systems in economic life is obvious. The extent, therefore, that legal framework help ensure that business risks can be assessed rationally, transaction costs are lowered, and governmental arbitrariness is minimized. Um, they should they should prove conducive to risk-taking, growth, and development. In an opposite scenario, the capricious application of rules generates uncertainty and inhibits the growth of private sector initiatives. Besides, legal and regulatory frameworks, consistency of public policy is also important. Government policies affect the investment climate directly, and economic actors require reasonable assurance about the future behavior of key variables such as prices, the exchange rates, and the employment levels. Governments do need to respond flexible to changing circumstances and to make mid-course corrections as necessary. Also, when governments change, the successor administration will understandably want public policy to reflect its priorities rather those of its predecessors. In predictability, the specific areas of action are legal framework for private sector development, regulation and policies, legal and institutional private sector, to regulate society and arrangement development. The last one is transparency. Transparency refers to the availability of information to the general public and clarify about government rules, regulation, and decision. Here in transparency, the difficulty with ensuring transparency is that only the generator of information may know about it and may limit access to it. It may be useful to strengthen the citizens' right for information with a degree of legal enforceability for similar reasons. Also, the transparency in government decision-making in public policy implementation reduce uncertainty and can help inhibit corruption among public officials. Rules and procedures that are simple, straightforward, and easy to apply are preferable to those that provide discretionary powers to government officials or that are susceptible to different interpretation. Here in transparency, the specific areas of action is the disclosure of the information.
Good day, everyone. I'm John Rodriguez, and our next topic for today is 5 Principles of Governance using UNDP's Indicators of Good Governance. The United Nations Development Program said that one of the reasons why a nation fails in achieving its Millennium Development Goals is poor governance. If governance is such an important to understand the factors leading to poor government performance, measure it and improve it by Adriano and Estimanda 2014. The first 5 principle of UNDP's program is the legitimacy and voice. Legitimacy and voice, which encompasses participation and consensus orientation on governance. The first term of legitimacy and voice, based on the UNDP's emphasize the principle of participation, whose thrust is that in any country, citizens must directly be part of the decision-making process or at the very least, they should indirectly participate through legitimate intermediate organs that are representative of society's intention. The next is consensus orientation. On the other hand, means good governance mandates different interests to reach a broad consensus on what is in the best interest of the group and who's possible on policies and procedures. Next is direction. Direction is a principle based on a strategic vision which includes human development and historical, cultural, and social complexities. It is a demonstration of effective leadership requires that participation and managers provide a consistent vision for the development of subject site, mobilize support, and public resource for implementation. The direction is relation to good governance, goes hand in hand with having a strategic vision. Leaders and the public have a broad and long-term perspective on good governance and human development. Next is performance. As one of the 5 UNDP's principles of good governance involves responsiveness, effectiveness, and efficiency on the government behalf. These 3 has been used to measure the government performance in general. Fourth is accountability. Accountability under a democracy such as in the Philippines, the people's fundamental faith in the integrity of political institutions is what holds the system together even under the most difficult times. Article 11, Section 1 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution state that public office is a public trust. Moreover, transparency should always be linked to accountability. Thus, transparency and accountability encourage officials to act in the public interest. And lastly, fairness. In relation to good governance must be equitable. All men and women have opportunities to improve or maintain their well-being and observe the rules of law, which means legal framework should be fair and enforced impartially, particularly the law on human rights. This further implies that the government should act in the public interest, treating all citizens fairly and equitably. This means no discrimination among citizens for wrong or irrelevant reason. In example, during Duterte administration, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte implement Tokhang. It's a drug on war. They kill the innocent people, drug users and pushers by the PNP without taking hesitation for the human rights. Many innocent people are killed by the government, but our government deny it. And that's all. Thank you.